Okay, so starting from where we left, we basically discussed about how traditional and cloud systems architecturally or at a higher level they differ, and that is the whole basis of this course to discuss about and tell you about the differences or the special things we need to be aware of when we are designing our cloud-based systems, right? So we'll talk about these things in much more detailed fashion in the rest of our course. Okay. Um, we are going to talk about, like I said, mostly Azure, right? But AWS also will cover. So we are going to discuss a little bit about how you can get the things, how the subscription or how the account setup is there for both AWS and Azure, so that you are aware of, because at the end of the day, cloud computing is nothing about talking, actually it's all about doing, right? So we need accounts and subscriptions and stuff. um, Another thing we need to be aware of these things is, first of all, you cannot do anything if you don't have accounts and all. But the second part also we need to know is how it affects the costing. Okay, every cloud resource or service that you will use will add to the cost of your employer or yourself if you are entrepreneur or having your own company, right? So you want to be minimize that. So that knowledge is also important. So we will discuss um, for AWS. So AWS, you would need an a AWS is Amazon Web Services. Okay, Amazon um, is is also the shopping e-commerce company, right? So part of Amazon Web Services is what we are, concerned about in context of cloud computing. Amazon Web Services is what their um, with the name of the cloud provider or cloud services provider, and for that you will need, as an individual, you need AWS account. Okay, or you can also have a business account. So individual account is like the general domains, Gmail, Hotmail, and others. Company account will be against the domain of a company, and you can register your company account, and they will, as a business, because they will figure it out from the at the rate what comes after in your email, that it's the company account. So based on that, you can they can create a account for you. So individual AWS account or for a business company account. So two kinds of accounts give you entry to the AWS world. So um, so coming to what happens in the AWS world, in the more modern or more recent changes in AWS. Earlier, it was not like this, but now you have got something, or you can organize AWS services and accounts using AWS organizations. So we started from the left that we have one company account, right? But if I am having a company account or my individual account, I cannot give credentials of that account to everybody in the company, right? So apparently, it is clear that there must be some governance mechanism. I want to have additional accounts for individual people who will, or employees who will use that those accounts to create services, to do R&D, to do development, and even hosting for our customers, things like that, right? Um, those will not be company, I mean, the master account which I am going to use. So I need to deal, it's like kind of in hierarchy. This company account that we are talking about in the left side, or individual account, is the master account. And then we want to create some um, candidate accounts or downstream accounts which can be managed by the company, right? So for that purpose, AWS organizations or AWS organization is available. So you can create an organization, add the accounts into them. So when you create an organization, you can create different organization units. Okay. So for example, admin unit one could be development unit, one could be testing unit, and then apply service control policy (SCP) to those organization units. Service control policy will have things like who gets access to what kind of services. Okay. For example, I don't need my admins to be able to create, let's say, SQL or a virtual machine. They don't need a virtual machine. They need to just configure things around and all, right? Or some other such policy, what kind of access they will have to the resources. um, I can have a policy applied to multiple organizational units. Like in this case, service control policy called dev test is applied to both dev and test. So, for example, I can say that up to this level, a dev or test can create a VM, the configuration of the VM. High computing machines, which are very costly, are not part of that. So, those kind of policies I can set. I can apply them on different OUs, okay, within an organization. So AWS organization gives us basically this structure which is helpful in managing these accounts. So as I will speak further, it will become more clear. Just bear with me. So you can apply these policies. So when you create an organization account and organization units, that will be managed by our master account, whether it is a company account or AWS account, right? So now this AWS account can create multiple master account can create multiple accounts like I was just talking about, so that they can individually access them. Then you add them into organization unit, right? So you created an organization, created organization units. They are like just like kind of folders. So you have a folder at higher level, then you have folder at lower level, setting the access rights and other things on those folders, kind of equivalent to that. So you created an AWS company account. Then you want to add your company people to AWS. So you will not start with this way. You can start from creating an organization. Then you create organizational units and create policies. Apply those into those policies. But that is only a structure. It is not having any accounts yet, right? Then using your master account, whether it is a company or individual account, you create multiple accounts and then you add them to a particular organization unit or attach them to a particular organizational unit, OU. Because of that OU attachment, the corresponding policy will get applied. So therefore, whatever access and things like that you had applied on this OU will apply to these accounts. Okay. So here we are having example of 4 accounts attached to dev OU and 2 accounts are attached to test OU. Okay, and then how it is beneficial. So this is basically how you will be able to organize multiple accounts governed by a master account in your AWS thing, right? Now that uh, is this thing. Earlier or even now you have IAM, identity and access management, but a more, like I said, a better way to do this is through organizations. So if somebody talks to you about identity and access or IAM account, that also is fine, but it is an older way of doing how you manage accounts. So why we want to have a, or why AWS created a organizations based um, management of the accounts is going to be clear from here. So this root account that we talked about in the previous slide, this master account is the root account. So it starts from the root account and then you attach one or more organizations on the right side to this. Okay. But on the earlier thing, identity and access management case, you had that only root account only. This is the root account only, and then you create groups of different people like IDs, and then you apply a policy on them. Okay, so these IDs are not AWS accounts. They are simply emails of your domain or whichever you want to add, whichever people you want to add. You can manage them. You can create a team out of them and apply policies out of them so that they will use this account, but they will not be able to access anything outside of this policy. Okay, here you have separate accounts. So this organization unit has separate account. These guys are also having separate accounts, and then policies are applied in the same fashion. Okay. Now, what is the difference? The difference is a question that I want to answer. Let's say, what is that question? The question is, when I am getting a bill, okay, when AWS sends me a bill of, let's say, 10,000 rupees monthly, they will send you that bill, right? Now, my expectation was based on their calculator and stuff like that, or my estimation. My expectation that was that the bill will be around 8,000 rupees. Okay, so now I want to know who used the remaining 2,000 rupees, or which team at least I want to split the bill so that I know how or which team needs more resources, or for an auditing purpose, I want to know who did what, right? There is no way to do that because the billing is against an account, okay, and I cannot bifurcate my bill against each of the group that I created. So I will get only one bill saying that you created these 10 VMs, these 5 databases, these 4 storage accounts, and I have no clue which team did that. I need to ask them personally, or I need to keep a separate track for what and who created what. So there is no lesser, you can say, lesser accountability, lesser visibility into who is using those assets that I created. Okay, but in case of AWS account, in terms of in the organization way, as the each organization unit is also having AWS accounts associated with them. Okay, they can be used to bifurcate it. So one more thing, this AWS account doesn't mean that it is a single person's account. It could be a team account. Okay, all dev team use this AWS account. So you can have one team using one organization unit having one AWS account also, and multiple people using that. The point is, we don't depend on the root. We have further AWS accounts associated with organizational units and individuals. So again, it is important to know that there is only one root account. These are not root accounts. These organizational unit level accounts are not root accounts. At organizational level, there's only one account. So when I get my bill, it will still be a single bill, like it was in IAM. Okay, it will be a single bill, but it will have details on which organization unit or which AWS account did what. It will be split between each AWS account or each organization unit. So I can find whether my dev organization unit created more assets, or my test organization unit created more assets, or within that also I can go to individual AWS account. Okay, this particular unit or sub team or feature team created the assets. Okay, so the whole purpose of new organization based management of your assets and accounts is twofold. One, you get to use this better way of splitting the teams and associating individual accounts to them. The direct benefit is basically you get the billing and usage details in much more granular fashion, and therefore you have more visibility into um, who consumed what of your resources, right? Because any business will be interested in knowing that, right? For accounting purpose, for audit purpose. So organization unit is the way to go for management of AWS accounts. So now, why should we know about this, right? We are not going to be hired as managers or a CEO of a company. So why should I even know about it? I'll be sitting when I get hired. I'll be sitting somewhere here, right? So why should I know about it? The point is that cloud computing is still very niche and new way of doing things. Okay, um, as young generation uh, people who are just entering into their careers, like you guys, right? For them it is a given thing, so you learn about that, right? But for people who have been here for 10, 15, 20 years, it is not a it's not a regular thing, right? It's a new thing for them. And as you grow in your age or grow in your career, the way to learn things becomes lesser and lesser organic. It becomes a forcing function, meaning, in simple terms, nobody wants to come out of their comfort zone and learn new things. Okay, so they will most likely, many of them will learn, who I am talking about, the older people or the people with more experience. They will learn only that much, is whatever is required. So they will know there is an AWS account, I want to use it, and things like that. But if you are aware that there is a better way of organizing your management, you can suggest it to your manager, for example, right? You can point out that this is what we are doing wrong, and everybody will appreciate a better organized account. The HR or the accounting team or the higher management people will appreciate your inputs. So it's never bad to know about such things, even though it may not be very significant, looking very significant, that why I will be aware of at organization level, right? So this is about how the AWS world starts, how the account management happens, how organizations are created. You can apply things around. Okay. Um, the the what happens in the Azure world? That's what we are going to talk about. Any questions? Anybody has any doubts on AWS things? Either here or anything else? Okay, cool. Let's discuss about the Azure. So sometimes Google Meet just ends the call without me knowing. It happened one time, one or twice. So in case you think I am out of the class, you can ping me or call me. I'll share my number in the group. Okay. Okay. So Azure. So for entering into Azure world, you need a Microsoft account. Microsoft account could be your personal account in terms of hotmail.com or outlook.com or live.com. Different, that the same account is used for accessing non-cloud services as well. So that is a Microsoft account. Or you can create an organization account. Organizational account in Microsoft world is called, I think, Office 365 account, or some other name, like your ID at orgname.onmicrosoft.com. So this gives a unique domain for accessing the services for the org. So if you create an organizational account, this on microsoft.com and your org name preferably, they will create this kind of unique domain. So you can access the services of Azure using these organizational account. Okay. So a Microsoft account or an organizational account will give you access to the Azure world. Now, in Azure, um, Account is not, you know, the unit of billing. Okay, so if you go back to organizations, AWS account was unit of billing. In Azure, it's not like that. In Azure, subscription is the unit of billing. Okay, excuse me. So what you do is you come up with an account administrator account. The organizational account is your account administrator account, which is one to one, meaning your one Azure account or one administrator account is mapped to one organization account. You can use the same for that, or you can create a separate Azure account and mark it as administrator account. Okay. So once you have administrator account, now I want to achieve the same thing. I want to know my development team doing what, right? What resources it is using. When I am deploying something, that is your DevOps thing, right? The management team or IT management team, which will run the service, make sure the service is up and running, and customers are able to use the application, right? We can have staging or testing, we can say, um, where test team is doing different kind of tests to make sure our application is working properly. Okay, so what we do is we create different subscriptions for each such role. Now subscription is a general thing. I i can name that subscription to whatever I like. One example is this, that I want my development team, my staging or testing team, and my production resources to be built separately, because production resources might be, it makes sense, production resources might be higher capacity resources, right? They might be required to run for a longer time. Development and staging would be only when the development is happening, then only they will be used. They may not be very like enterprise level licenses and things like that, right? So it makes sense to let's say um, keep production separate from testing and development, and within the development or shipping process of a product, I do want to check what is the cost of my development and what is the cost of my staging. Also, I don't want to, I want a clean separation in terms of engineering also. Development subscription, if I use, I will create some VMs and things like that, right? I want my testing team to be completely on different, to use completely different account, so that there is clear separation between development and testing. There is no interference. For example, what kind of interference? For example, process level issue. For example, uh, my development team is using some database for testing, and for some reason there is some data that in a table which makes this scenario work, whatever scenario is, right? If my testing team is using same database, it is making that scenario work, but actually that data is not by default going to come over there. So we are having a bug. If that data or that values of that row are not there, there is some bug, it will not work properly. But because accidentally somebody added that data, or somebody while development added that data and did not remove it, the software is still working. If my staging phase also uses the same database, I am not going to discover that bug even there, right? But if my staging has no access to this database, it has to create its own database. More likely than not, I will create a fresh database, or I'll pick up from my testing uh, databases, and likely that my development bug will get revealed in the staging area, because uh, my application does not have that data to let it work further, right? So that is like a process level or engineering level issue. That those kind of issues also I want. For those kind of issues also, I want the clear separation between development and staging. Billing is not the only thing. Okay. So the baseline, I will create subscription for each of the uh, development, staging, and production. Okay. So uh, then for each subscription, I can create a service administrator account, which will have one-to-one mapping between a subscription and a service administrator. So for an Azure account, an account administrator will have one-to-one mapping. For each subscription, we can have multiple service administrators for an Azure account. So one to multiple service administrator mapping, Azure account to service administrator, one to many. Okay. Within a subscription, the service administrator will have one-to-one mapping with the subscription. For each subscription, there will be only one service administrator. And then each subscription can have co-administrators, which can manage further things up to 10. You can have 10 co-administrator accounts. And this is only management. We are not even talking about who all are using this account, right? So you can add people, your company domain people, into the subscription, and as administration will be done by the co-administrators or service administrators. Similarly, for each subscription, like staging subscription, we will have a separate service administrator, separate co-administrators. Physically, most same people might be using the different, same people, physical human beings could be playing two roles, but accounts wise, service administrator can be only associated with one subscription, and co-administrator can only work under a service administrator, like that. Okay. And when you get a bill, the question is, I really like this animation. The question is, what about the billing part, right? So in Azure, the billing is done at a subscription level. The bill will come against your account, but it will be at each subscription. For each subscription, you will have um, a bill, a separate accounting. So therefore, you will come to know what are the details of each subscription, what they are consuming, and what all the resources they consume. Okay. Um, so there is no way to pause the recording, right? Okay. So can somebody please, like, later find out if there is a possibility of pausing the recording so that I can, pause it and then start it again. Otherwise, it will be, two recordings or three recordings. Sometimes I need to pause it so that it doesn't get recorded. So check if somebody can figure out a way. Okay. So um, this is the Azure world. Okay. So we have talked about, I gave you theoretical underpinning of what Azure and AWS accounts look like. But obviously, when you will go practically, you may not find all these things, but try to discover things, try to find out more. Probably I will try to come up with an assignment or an exercise for tomorrow's lab related to this. You can try it out. Okay. So this was about how you can create or manage your accounts in Azure and AWS. Any questions before we move further? So each one of you should create both, I think, AWS and Azure accounts. I will advise that you stick to one service provider for doing your practicals. Okay. Um, like I said in the beginning, it is a problem because people or students get confused between AWS and Azure if you try to do in parallel both things. And if I try to talk for everything about AWS and Azure, I tell that this happens, this is how it happens in AWS, this is how it happens in Azure, not for everything. So pick up one and then um, use it. And the second one, if you pick up Azure, you just go through it that what equivalent service is there. You can just read about it like that you can do. Or once you are comfortable with that service, let's say virtual machines, okay, in Azure, then you can uh, see or read about AWS, how it is done. You can do to whatever extent you want to go for AWS. But learning one thing, small portion in AWS, and then the same small portion in Azure for the same kind of service, I think that might become confusing. So pick up one service and use it properly for your practicals and all. Okay, and keep the second one as secondary service. Another thing I want, okay, so before that I come to there, one more thing is, if you ask me to pick up one of the two, I will suggest you pick up Azure, because of the resource availability, or the availability of material to learn in Azure is much more than AWS. At least that is what I know of. But I am definitely sure that AWS also has a lot of documentation. In general, I find learning about Azure much easier than AWS because of the resources. Um, but that shouldn't be an impediment. If somebody wants to really do AWS only, please go ahead. Okay, but my recommendation for cloud computing course to learn things will be Azure because of the level of detail in documentation that they have. Okay. But like I said, you can even use Google Cloud also for by all means. There is no restriction on that. One more thing, as you would expect, mostly people are not well versed with cloud computing, and unfortunately, that is true for our teaching assistants also. Okay, so I don't expect them to be able to help you so much during your labs and your other things. Whatever you expect from TAs. For example, I explain to them for checking the marks, these answer sheets of exams. I detail tell them in detail what to expect in answers, okay, and they just follow that. So we don't want to set high expectations, not because they are incompetent or anything, no, just because they may not be aware of it and they don't have time of, I think, I'm assuming, to attend my lectures and then you help you out, right? So we are mostly on our own here, okay, and of course I am with you, so feel free. That's why use this time, lecture time, use the lab time. I may not be available during the lab time, but if you post a question in the classroom, Google Classroom, it I will get on my phone or something, some kind of notification will be there. I should be able to reply to you or come online, for example, if the lab is going on, and help you guys. All right. So we need to work in a team in tandem, so that your learning is not hindered. Your learning is constant and deep. That is my goal. So, but I need your help in helping you. Okay. So pick up a resource cloud provider. I will recommend Azure, and if you have any doubts, please ask in labs or lectures, especially, and ask in the Google Classroom. Google Classroom should be used for a lot of communications. You can keep asking there. We can create a Google chat group or something if the conversation is so high. I will love to know that, and then we can create a Google chat group for our conversations if classroom becomes too chatty. But I would like to that to happen. So feel free to uh, do that. Post your questions. Okay. So those are the limitations or handicaps that we have got, and we need to overcome by working in tandem. Okay. So ask your questions, ask your doubts, and keep keep reading. There are so many other resources. Like I said, I am not providing any of this information out of my brain. I might be developing some exercises, some discussion points, some experience I will share with you. But all of this material mostly are is available online, right? So um, you should repeat that or refer to it later on as the day progresses, as the time progresses in our course. Okay. Any questions? Any doubts? Anybody? All right. We'll move ahead. Now we will talk about data center technologies. So what is data center and what is data center technology, why it is important, things like that, and why we need to know about that. So we'll answer all those questions. Um, when I am creating a virtual machine, okay, it is why it is virtual. Why it is virtual? Because I can connect to it sitting from my convenience of my office or my laptop, right? Um, it's not a real machine. Virtual means not real, right? But ultimately, like I drew a diagram in last lecture. Ultimately, somewhere down the line, there will be a real machine sitting, a real operating system running, right? A real power source coming, a real cooling solution for such large set of such machines will have to be employed. So where is that machine? Where is the real machine, right? The way these things these cloud service provider do is that they open up huge um, hardware centers. They call them data centers, and the physical machines are present or set up in those data centers in racks and stuff like that. If you check online, you will come to know. Um, Equivalent could be that, for example, the warehouses of e-commerce people, right? Amazon has different warehouses. You can shop online, and the item that you shop will be picked up from one of the warehouses and shipped to you, right? Similarly, this e-commerce shopping is kind of creating a VM, right? And actual a VM will be created on an actual machine sitting in some data center. Okay, and now that is one thing, but why do I care about a data center? I just want to create a virtual machine, right? Data centers are spread throughout the world, okay, and they are not many. Maybe few tens or few hundreds. If you have like companies like Microsoft who have a lot of money to spend, they can only create few tens of data centers. Maybe very low hundred, maybe 100 or 50. I don't know what is the current count. But there are very few data centers. For example, India is one of the largest countries in the world in terms of both area and count of people. I think there are only two or three data centers that Microsoft Azure has in India. Out of them, only one is recommended in the recommended list. AWS, I think, has only one. Google Cloud, I don't know, and no other apparently other cloud provider which I know has data center. But even if let's say IBM has, they will start with one. So one data center for the whole continent. It's not only India. Anybody working from Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or even further down, Mauritius or Indonesia or things like that, they will be using Central India database data center or the APEC Japan data center or some Singapore data center. It's not geographic or political country bound thing, but there is a reason why data centers are put in a particular place that we will also discuss. But the overall idea is that they need nodal points from where they will provide the services. They meaning the cloud service provider, right? So for that, um, earlier there were no such thing. Okay, there were no such things at such a scale where you can, as a company, if I am the Microsoft CEO, I am, I am very interested in setting up the data center at the right places. Okay, I want to ensure that my costs are minimized for running such huge data centers, and I want to make it most return of my investment, meaning I want most of my customers to be able to access those data centers in a convenient way, in a distributed way, which is more optimal, right? um, I am also interested in minimizing the cost, not only in terms of setting up data centers or managing, but running the data center, running the like running cost, um, power consumption, right? And hardware usage, replacement, upgrades. I am also interested in optimizing everything so that basically my investment or my money that I'm putting is less. Also, I am interested to set it up such a way that I can provide different tailored solutions to my users, right? So, for example, I'm just one single individual. I want to create a virtual machine. From this level or this side of spectrum, all the way towards I'm a government organization, I want a separate uh, machines, or I want a set of machines. Let's say as a government organization, I want 50 machines for some reason, but my mandate is I want those 50 machines to be completely separate from rest of the machines. Not even power source should be same. Not even they shouldn't share the broadband optical fiber cable also. So if as a Microsoft owner, I did not take care of such user scenarios, then I'm going to miss out on that customer, right? That customer will go to some other cloud provider who has that provision. So am I able to provide such isolation within my data center? Right? That is the question I want to answer when I am designing the data center. So the point I am trying to come to is data center is called a technology because of this, a humongous size and different ways to calibrate it, calls it a technology, calls for a technological um, inputs or practices. So therefore, because of all these reasons, data centers are very important, and it helps us as a developers to know um, that about the data centers also. Why? Because even if we create a virtual machine, you will have to specify which region you want in. Okay, if you don't pay attention to that, if I am deploying my application on a virtual machine, where is that application going to be used mostly by? Let's say it is for US customers, right? Now, if I deploy that application without paying a heed to where it is getting deployed, if that application is getting deployed in India data center or Japan data center, it is like a continent away from, or the other side of the globe, the US. So you can talk about latency and everything, right? Instead of that, I could deploy it on in a data center which is inside of US political boundary, right? Um, what if I want to run these services in Australia? Does it make sense to have a data center in the US? No, because it's like seas apart, right? So it is important to know where our services are getting deployed, and because of the latencies and other global availability things. So as a developers also, we should be aware of our data centers. So we will talk about data centers in both AWS and Azure. Okay. So when we have a Amazon Web Services, they are the data centers are split in different regions. Okay. Um, a particular data center will be named against a region. So, for example, Central India, East US. Um, these are more like an Azure way of naming data centers, but ultimately, a data center will be associated with a region. Okay, and within that region, within that data center, we will have availability zones. Okay, now, and what is the difference between availability zones connected to each other and regions connected to each other? Why this connection? There is a connection, right? But it is dotted line and this is hard line. The the thing is, within a region, the availability zone could be a building. Okay, um, so Generally, data center, when I have talked about so much, the picture that will come into my mind is that data center is equivalent to one large building. Okay. Technically, that is not true. In most cases, it is true, especially in AWS case. Uh, it could be bunch of buildings also near to each other, not very far away from each other, near to each other, which are catering to same region data center. So each such isolation thing or each such building is can be a availability zone. Okay, so one regional data center could have, let's say, three buildings of hardware, maybe situated 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers away from each other. That's fine. The main point is these availability zones are connected to each other with dedicated optical fiber or whatever technology they are connecting, optical fiber, I guess, dedicated, owned by Amazon cable between them. It's not a, it's not a, there is no, there's nothing that goes through internet, the common internet. Okay. So dedicated, privately owned. Dedicated means between one availability zone to other availability zone, this dedicated cable is connected and they cater to the same region. Between two regions, it is a normal internet, even though it could be an optical fiber cable only. But along with my traffic, my Amazon traffic, Azure traffic might also be going through that. Or if I am sending a chat, WhatsApp chat as an individual to another individual in the US, that also could be going through the same optical fiber cable. So it's like basically common internet traffic. So between two regions, the connectivity is through regular internet because the regions are very, very far away from each other, hundreds of kilometers from each other. Okay. So we have got the concept of regions and availability zones in AWS. Okay. Now, when we create our AWS account, the master account, that has a global scope. Okay. So there will be only you cannot have it at a regional level, right? It's only one AWS account in the whole Amazon Web Services. Okay. Smaller account that we created in the previous slides when we were creating organization unit, that also only an organization or managing them, right? You cannot have the same name account anywhere else, even if it is a different organization. You cannot have it. So AWS accounts visibility or scope is global scope. It is associated with whole AWS, any account. You can put it in an organization unit so that it has access and all based on the policy. But at the account level, no other account can be same in even if it is in different organization. Organization is just a management of the things. The account has a global scope. Okay. Then regional scope, when you create a virtual machine which is called EC2 instance, as an example, Elastic Cloud Compute instance, that is associated at a region. When you will, like I said, I was telling you, no, virtual machine, it is equivalent to EC2 instance in AWS world. When you create a virtual machine, you do not associate it to availability zone. It will be associated to a region. So you will have to pick one of the two regions, for example, in this case, when you are creating a virtual machine, meaning the virtual machine or the EC2 instance will be put in hardware in this region or hardware in the other region. So VMs or some resources will have a regional scope. So in AWS, there is a global scope, like AWS account. Some resources will have global scope, which is AWS account, for example. Some will have regional scope, like a virtual machine will be associated or EC2 instance will be associated with the region. So regions are completely isolated from other regions. Right? Completely isolated means um, they do not share, for example, same power cables. Right? Obviously, they have greatest possible fault tolerance and stability, meaning If my application is so critical, I will deploy the application in two regions just for the availability perspective. If one region goes down, the other regions should still be up. They are designed or they are set up like that, um, for even for catastrophic events, right? If a earthquake comes, let's say it brings down a region in Delhi, okay, because the earthquake came and it broke down the fiber cables, or broke the building is demolished, not demolished, they came down because of the seismic activity. Now it is unlikely that similar damage could be there in Mumbai also, right? Because you have got a region there. Unlikely that the earthquake will be such huge thing that it will destroy two cities which are more than 2,000 kilometers apart, right? So if I if my application is so critical, I will deploy them in both Delhi and Mumbai region. The opposite, let's say if very high, what do you say, cyclone or things like that come because of the access or the Mumbai's proximity to the shore, right? It destroys power cables or things like that. My Delhi region is unlikely to get affected of that, right? So therefore, it is a greatest possible fault tolerance you can put. Why it is greatest possible? Because region level is the association. You cannot have one virtual machine up spread across all the regions. Okay, so at region level, you have greatest possible fault tolerance and stability. Then it will not replicate resources across regions automatically. Now, this is also important to understand. When I create a resource in a region, okay, by default, the cloud technology provider itself, by default, by policy, will replicate the data of that resource internally, because they don't want you to, they have SLAs, service level agreements of uptime. Okay, my VM will be uptime 99.99% of the time. Underlying upgrades and all. So they want the upper layer of virtual machines to be available, right? They want to switch the underlying machine, things like that. So for that, they will create replicas of the data, but that is confined always within a region. It will the data cloud provider will not replicate automatically across the region. It will replicate within the region, but not across the regions. So you will have to configure yourself that you want the data replication across the region. Okay. So automatic data replication does not have regional scope. It has a regional scope. It is not a global scope. You'll have to put names of the regions where the data will replicate manually. You will have to enter those region names if you want to use it. It will not happen automatically. Then obviously within the region, that there are no charges of data transfer, because obviously they are confined to a closed place and connected through dedicated cable. So uh, cloud provider do not charge for the data movement within the region. But if you want to move the data across the region, for example, like I want to replicate the data across the regions for my application, that charge will come. The cost, there will be cost associated with the data movement. And while I am at it, generally egress, data going out from the region uh, is not charged. Data coming in to the region is generally charged. That is general trend. Okay, so in the zone scope, what is the zone scope? Like I said, it is actually telling you that there could be multiple data centers even within the zone. So it is even one level of more hierarchy that I constructed verbally to you. multiple buildings. Each building is called a data center. 3 or 4 buildings combined together will be availability zone, and then 3 or 4 buildings at some location little away from that will be another availability zone connected to each other. Right now, within the availability zone, the data center, how will you distinguish between two data centers? Right? Why only the physical building, or there is something else? It need not to be physical building. The key point is the power source and the network will be dedicated for each data center. Two data centers will not share the network cable and the power sources. Okay, so that is the zone scope. So you can put the EC2 instance in a particular zone in a region, and then availability zone maps to one or more physical data center, or it is called facility in Amazon AWS world. So availability zone maps to one or more facility, and it is one or more, right? It could be one availability zone, one facility, or one availability zone, multiple facilities. And availability zones, AZs, are connected to each other with the fast private fiber optics network, like I was mentioning, right? And uh, the instances that you are creating, I am creating EC2 instance in a region, so it can be distributed across the zones for continuity of the application. One data center could have one VM or EC2 instance that I created. The replica could be here, lying here, that the AWS created, right? So, but it will be within the region. So these are the data technology things for AWS. Okay. Um, what is the Azure side? Okay, Azure side also we have regions, Azure regions. Okay, and within a region you can have multiple locations. Um, in Azure, we have a concept called paired region. So every region has a paired region automatically assigned by Microsoft. It is not picked up by us. The Azure region has a paired region with it. And the distance between two regions is generally more than at least 480 kilometers. Okay, so they are physically very far away from each other. Um, when you store data in Azure, uh, it is triplicated in the region and it's paired region. So in Azure, it is different, right? The data that you are storing inside a region, Azure will automatically triplicate it in the region that you are adding your VM in, meaning there will be 3 copies of your data. You don't have access to those 3 copies. It is for the, like I said, right, SLA. They are promising that this will be my uptime, so they need to have a backup of everything. So they are having 3 copies in Azure region and 3 copies in the paired region. Okay, so availability set is the unit of what do you say, redundancy. Okay, so the SLA, service level agreement, of 99.95% of the uptime, it will be holding true only if 2 or more VMs are put in an AV set, availability set. So what is this availability set? Availability set is basically a group. Okay, what Azure tells is that if you create a VM, there is only one virtual machine that you are creating, then I cannot guarantee that SLA of 99.95% will hold. Meaning, SLA, service level agreement, or a promise of the cloud provider, says that in general it will say that if you create virtual machines, I am providing SLA of 99.95%. But the caveat there is, the detail there is that it mandates that you have to create 2 or more virtual machines, okay, and put them in an availability set, then only I will be able to provide you the 99.95% uptime. Okay. So single machine, there is no 99.95% up. It will remain up for most of the time, but it is not guaranteed. Okay, this SLA you can hold Microsoft against it if they don't support this much. Okay, so it is clear that they are saying you create two or more VMs and put them in a single availability set, then I can hold 99.95% of availability. Okay, so now there are other terms. What is this fault domain and update domain? So what happens is uh, two things. If I am, so you can consider this this diagram here on the left side. These are racks. Let's say these are racks. Okay. Um, when on a single rack, I will have multiple machines put there in my data center in Azure data center, right? Then now when somebody is creating VMs, they are using those VMs, the underlying hardware and the underlying operating system. They will need upgrades. My hardware might need upgrade because new technology has come. Most likely than not, my hardware needs upgrade because it is faulty. The hard disk goes down or some other issue, right? Fan is not working or things like that. So hardware needs changes and upgrades. Second thing is at software level also I need upgrades, right? The underlying software on which the hypervisor is running, they are also ultimately software. So operating system get updated all the time. So if Windows Server is running, Windows Server to 2012 is running. Now 2019 is there, 2022 is there. So Azure will want to upgrade them to the latest Windows Server versions, right? To use their capable new features, new capabilities. So both at terms of at hardware level upgrades might be required, at operating system level or software level upgrades will be required that are not visible to the user. Okay, they are the from the upgrade required from the perspective of cloud provider. So I'm a cloud provider, I need to upgrade my hardware, I need to upgrade my operating system. My users are not aware of that, they don't see it, but it is a requirement for me. So how do I manage it, right? So what I do is I make this policy clear so that it is clear how users can set their system VMs or system of VMs such that for maximum availability it is possible to update the real hardware. So obviously if I am updating the hard disk of a machine, I have to power it off, right? If I am updating a fan, I have to power it off. I can't do it while it is running. So the hardware set is put under fault domains, meaning each rack you can say has a separate power source and network cable, and that is a fault domain. Each fault domain is separate from each other. You can roughly equivalent to a rack, but a fault domain has a separate power source and network cable. If I switch off this power cable, the machine, all the VMs on this rack will go down. They will get switched off. But none of the VMs in any other rack will be switched off. If the network cable get cut, all the VMs will go offline, but none of the other VMs will go offline if they're cut at the rack level, right? So a fault domain between two fault domains, what is different? Power source and network cable. Okay, network and power source are dedicated for each fault domain. Then update domains, they are the groupings for updating the software part of it. Now, so when we are updating software, there is nothing hardware, right? We don't want to uh, power off and on things, but update might require restarts, right? Update might degrade the performance. So we do need to make sure that we manage those also. So update uh, for updating the softwares or upgrading the softwares, these are called update domains. So how they manage or how it is done. So as you can see, let's say I am creating virtual machines. Okay. When I create a VM1, by default, I don't, by the way, I don't get to choose fault domain and update domain. This is automatically done by Azure. But we need to be aware of why. I will tell you. Uh, I create a VM, this blue color VM, VM1. When I create this VM, automatically it is assigned update fault domain 0 and update domain 0. Okay. When I create another VM, now Azure, by when it is creating the VM, I don't pick this fault domain and update domain like I said, right? So when I just create a VM, I just pick the region in which it will be and what is the configuration of that VM. Now the Azure has option to create a VM in the same update fault domain, but it does not do that. It will put in a separate fault domain. Okay. If you are creating a availability set, so you will create a availability set, you will create a VM into that. I mean, you will create a VM, put that VM into that availability set. You create a second VM, put that VM into that availability set. When Azure detects that you are creating a second VM in the same availability set, it will not put VM2 in the same fault domain. It will put into the next fault domain. When you create VM3, it will put into the third fault domain. So in an availability set, last time I made these notes, there were three fault domains in one availability set. Okay, so the creation of virtual machines will be distributed across the fault domains first. Now, if you create a fourth VM, obviously you can have only three fault domains per availability set. So the cycle repeats. The VM4 will be put into the same fault domain. VM5 next, VM6 next, and so on. Like that, it will distribute. Okay. Now, what about the update domains? Update domains again. Let's take example of five. Resource manager, via resource manager, if you create through scripts and all, it goes up to 20, but the idea is same. VM1 is the blue color, right? VM2 is green, VM3 is this grayish, VM4 is dark gray or blackish, right? So why these different colors are there? Colors are there because each color denotes one update domain. So when I create VM1, it is associated with the fault domain, but it is also given an update domain. When I create VM2, it is associated to a second fault domain. It is also associated to a separate update domain. That means VM1 and VM2 will never update together. Okay. If VM1 is getting updated, VM2 will not be getting updated. If VM2 is getting updated, VM1 will not be updated. They will never update at the same time. So I create a VM3. In addition to putting it in this different fault domain, it is also put into the third update domain. If I create VM4, it is put into the fourth update domain. VM5, fifth update domain. VM6 is going to come back to the first update domain. VM7 will come back to the second update domain. VM8 will be assigned third update domain. Now, if an update happens, so or let's say all VMs are of same configuration, Windows Server 2019. Okay, I am underlying operating system is that. Okay. Uh, Now that operating system needs to get updated. So remember this, the operating system I'm talking about is not of this VM, the underlying operating system, right? So it will be distributed such that VM1 and VM6 will be updated together. VM3 and VM8 will be updated together. VM7 and VM2 will be updated together, and VM4 will be updated together separate. VM5 will be updated separate. The update domains VMs will get updated together. Okay, so that is the idea behind fault domains and update domains. Why it is important is because when you are creating these VMs, right? These VMs need to be refreshed, updated, restarted. Any update and restart makes your service unavailable, right? So if you don't choose your roles of your VMs wisely, the application uh, could come down. Okay, so I will discuss an example of this uh, in next lecture. Unfortunately, don't have enough time for that, but don't worry. We will make sure that I'll make sure that you understand this. Okay, but for now, the takeaway is, what is the difference between two fault domains? The power and network cables. Hardware cables are different. Then the distribution of update and fault domains is automatic, not controlled by us. But we need to be aware of it. Why? Because the role which we are putting for VM1 and VM6 or VM1 and VM4, that will determine how our application is going to behave. Okay, that example we will do in the next lecture. Okay. Um, we can go through this quiz. So far what we have discussed, it's not a like a marks wala quiz. It's just for the revision purpose. So we have this SQL database instance. Before I start, anybody has any questions on these region things? Okay, so if you are clear, then good. So the SQL database instance in cloud is throttling. I move it from standard to premium tier. This move is an example of horizontal or vertical scaling. Anyone? Throttling means it has reached its capacity. So I move or I change its tier from standard to premium. So what is this? Is this a horizontal scaling example or a vertical scaling example? Anyone?
Sir, I guess
Vertical.
horizontal.
Vertical scaling? Why it is vertical scaling?
We are not adding a new database, but we are upgrading a particular database, like database
Yes.
instance.
Good. Right. So we are not adding a new or an instance in parallel, right? We are upgrading an existing one to the next level. For example, there is no super premium tier. All you have got is premium tier. So there is a limit in vertical scaling always. So it's an example of vertical scaling. Good. Um, so I need to create my resume for placement interviews. I run MS Word online through Office 365 subscription to create my resume. This is an example of infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or SaaS, software as a service.
Software as a service?
Why it is software as a service, you think?
Sir, because we are using the MS Word software and we are
Mhm.
not we don't have to manage the application of MS Word. We just need to create our resume. That's it.
Very good. Yes, you're right. The key question when we try to identify, especially between PaaS and SaaS, is that who is responsible for the application that is in the question and the data associated to that application. So when, um, as a user, I want to create my resume by running MS Word online. So the application in question is MS Word. Okay, and the data of that application in question is my resume's data. It is not my document, but it is the data that MS Word needs to take care of, including my account information, my subscription information, and of course my the document, right? So all that data is associated with that MS Word application. The key question is, am I responsible to manage that data and am I responsible to manage that application? So if the answer is no to those, both of those, then it is a SaaS. If the answer is yes, then it is PaaS. Okay. So for Microsoft, it is a PaaS thing because they are providing platform as a service. or if I am writing my own application and I'm using MS Word as an API, okay, my application is using MS Word as SaaS, but to where I am deploying it, that will be I am using that as a PaaS, right? Wherever the question comes, who is managing that application? If I am not managing, I am using a SaaS. Who is managing the MS Word? I am not managing it, so I am using it as a SaaS. Who is managing the data of MS Word? I am not managing it, so I am using it as a SaaS. Okay, so it's a SaaS example. I provisioned or created, provisioning means creating, an AVM instance in my AWS cloud. So this, unfortunately, it should be EC2 instance, not the correct nomenclature. I provisioned an EC2 instance in my AWS cloud for installing a web server. Okay, this is an example of IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS.
PaaS.
PaaS. How it is PaaS?
We will be responsible for the data and all the other things will be managed by AWS.
Not entirely correct. When you're creating a virtual machine, you're not only responsible for the data and application on that machine, you're also responsible for updating the operating system on that virtual machine,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
right? So that is an infrastructure that you're using. You're using it, the virtual machine for you, whether it is virtual or real, it's just basically a machine, right? So just as it may, you you cannot use VM unless you use it for the purpose that you want to create it, you create it for. Meaning, just by creating virtual machine, you're not using it, right? You have to deploy on top of it, let's say web server or some other thing, or you have to install some SQL server on it. You have to do further than that. So virtual machine is a lower level, though. It's the equivalent of an empty machine. So it's an IaaS because you are responsible for the operating system upgrades of that machine before even the application comes into play. So it's a example of infrastructure as a service. Okay. So my company has multiple AWS accounts for running its business in the AWS account. So many accounts are causing access and tracking confusions. My boss just asked me to look for a solution for this issue. And what is that solution?
Creating organizations.
Yes. So obviously, right, we can use AWS organizations to create the organization units, assign service control policies to each of them, right? And then we make one AWS account as a master account for that organization. Then the billing will happen against that master account, and the rest of the accounts can be, split in that bill itself. The single bill, uh, but still same information that who is using what. In Azure, an Azure subscription can have multiple Azure accounts. True or false? An Azure
False.
subscription, yes, it is false because
It's false.
yeah, Azure account can have multiple subscriptions, but one subscription can be associated only with the um, single Azure account. So it is false. In Azure, I create my Azure account and then I create a VM under it. All good? True or false? So I create an Azure account and then I create a virtual machine. Is there anything missing or it's okay? That's how I'll do it.
Sir, we also need a subscription.
Yes, true. So merely creating Azure account does not give you right or a way to create a virtual machine. Any resource, forget about virtual machine, any cloud resource created in Azure has to as be there under a single subscription. So it has to be within a subscription. So you need to create a subscription first. No resources can be created under an Azure account directly. Okay. And each resource can associate only to one subscription, obviously, because the billing is at subscription level, and billing is all about which resources are consumed how much, right? So a resource can be associated to only one account, one subscription. Okay, so we'll do this exercise after I explain my idea on that AWA availability set and things like that. Okay, so I'll try to come up with some assignment. I don't have a ready assignment for this lab, so if I find some way to give you some work, then we'll have tomorrow's lab. Otherwise, we'll skip tomorrow's lab. Let me figure it out. Okay. Any questions? So I'll stop the recording for now.